welcome. I wanted to share with you today a little short and sweet Valentine. Although we're going to go step by step through embossing, we're going to go through each tool and item we use because I've never done this before, so this will be a new one for you. So you're going to want your handmade paints, whatever they are, or commercial brand. They don't have to be. You're going to want your paints. Okay, got those. You're going to want tape. If you use tape to tape down your paper, I really like these little Meeden cotton papers. I'm going to use that. I'm going to tape this onto a plexiglass, just a preference of mine. If you're going to the embossing part, I will give you the list, but here is the embossing powder I'm going to use gold today. I'm going to use this Versamark stamp pad. I keep it with a rubber band to make sure it stays sealed, and so it doesn't dry out. And then we're going to use a couple stamps. Any stamps you have, doesn't matter. If you don't have stamps, use a gold pen. You can also use gold metallic watercolor. That is fine too. Okay, and then we're going to use a card or some sort of cardstock. You'll see why later. I also like to have a cheap, you'll see, to dust off paint, something that you won't use for paint later, just like a sweeper. I'm going to use a heat tool. I'm going to have my brushes, and I'm going to have my water, and I think that's it. Whatever else you may need, it'll be something simple that you already have on your table. Oh, maybe some shimmer paints. Okay, let's get started. I'll try to be brief. I'll try not to talk too much about extra stuff so that we can focus on the task at hand. We're going to tape down our paper. We're going to leave a tiny border. Since they are Valentines, they're going to be small. At least the ones I'm doing are going to be small. And so I'm going to tape the top, and that tape was too small. Top and the bottom. I always tape opposite sides first, like this. Okay, you want to press pretty good. I don't mind the edges, like when the paint gets under. I think it kind of adds a little the edges, I don't mind that. I feel like it adds a little retro-y kind of vintage feel. But if it bothers you, you'll want to use a Holbein soft tape and your paint will not leak through. I am using subpar tape from Jackson's right now, and it does leak often. You can wet your paper, or you don't have to wet your paper. I did not wet my paper on the last one, although, you know what, let's wet our paper this time. I think it will be fun because you kind of want your paints to spread a lot. Okay, so I just sprayed it. I'm not going to be super anal and like sweep it all around. I'm just gonna leave it like that. I'm going to take a flat brush. I have a 1/2 inch and a 1/4 inch, I'm guessing. I think I'll use a 1/4 inch. And this is an Artify brush. I do love their brushes. And I'm going to take my handmade paints. You can use any paints. I'm going to just pick a color. I'm going to stick within the color scheme. I think we'll turn our paper that way. And I'm just going to start sweeping some colors. I'm not going to overthink this part. I'm just going to go for it. Doesn't matter if my lines are straight. I'm going to try to maybe get some contrasting colors so that there's some, you know, variances between those. If I pick maybe like these 3 pinks right here, they're just going to be so close that it might not be as interesting. But if you do that, that's fine too. If that's something you feel, you know, your thing, that's awesome. Do it. So now I'm going to take this color Current. If you're using this pinup set, that first color was Lipstick. The second color was the Helio one. This darker color is called Current. And the other pink, I believe, is Posy. It doesn't matter though. Use what makes you happy. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of go with it here. And now I'm taking a vintage violet, a super beautiful color that I love. So my last one had a little more defined lines, and this one I'm kind of just going with it a little more. This is Rouge. This is the pinup palette of Carrie's Addison and Sedgwick. I'm going to take a bit of this really dark blue, and I forget the name of it. Inky. Inky is the name of it. I'm just going to drop some of that in there. I feel like really dark kind of helps ground a piece, and so that's what I liked about dropping that Current in there. And I'm going to drop a little this guava next to the Inky. So the only thing doing with the wet on wet first is that it does kind of spread a lot. And so as you see in this initial one, the stripes tend to, you know, not go crazy, which I do like. And so let's see how we end up liking this one. And that way you'll know which way you'd like to approach this. Okay, and let's see, let's grab some cantaloupe. We didn't use cantaloupe in the last one. It is a more orangey color. And then we can just go grab some oleander. This is a great way to just kind of play with your colors. I do like to use darker colors on the edge, so now I'm going to go with an electric rose. I like the way darker colors tend to frame, and this is a lot of water, as you can see. So my advice is maybe not do so much water as I did, but you know what? It'll just be a more loose look, and it's not a bad thing. So I'm just going to go around the edges and pick up some of the extra water I have, because again, I do have a lot of water and I don't want it necessarily going back in. So now what I'll do, my dry sweep, this brush, again, I know I say this every time, but this brush never gets wet and it's always going to be my dry sweeper. And then I just kind of do this, okay? So it did tone down a lot, but I also picked up some of that water. So I'm going to drop some more color in. I'm going to take this current color, and since it's kind of darker, I'm just going to do this and get some kind of bolder lines in there. I'm going to take kind of a stronger strength paint, which just means that I'm not using as much water this time around. So see, I'm getting a darker color here. I'm going to go back in some of my rows and just kind of add more color in most of them. And, you know, just to make it seem a little, we're going to add some of that inky color there. And I feel like this color here definitely got washed out and kind of went away. We'll grab our current color again, and you can blot out on a piece of towel next to you in case you're getting way too much water on these, which I was. And so we're just kind of going for this stripy feel. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't even have to be anything you necessarily like. Okay, so once we kind of got these going, we're going to take our dry brush again, and we're just going to sweep the colors a bit. Okay, now that we have that, we are going to, actually, you know what, this area down here needs just a little bit of dark. I'm going to take my current here. Okay, and I'm just using very light touches with that tip of the flat brush right there, just kind of dropping almost like little dash lines, just to add a little bit of like I don't know if you would call it maybe like a wood grain, you know, just a little more texture. Call it what you will. All right, I am just kind of adding these little lines because later I feel like it adds the texture that I'm looking for. I just happen to have a tiny little collection of shimmers I'm going to use. That was a joke. I have a few more than tiny amounts. I'm going to go for a gold. This is Laura's Handmade Shimmers Cosmic Creations. My pure gold. Do want to get these pretty wet, which we don't want them super wet for this piece. We got our nice and liquid gold. We're going to drop this gold in. We're going to dry off our, so when I say dry off our brush, I just dab the base of the brush. I don't try to lose the paint on the tip. I just try to dab the base of the brush so that some of the water that's in all the brush bristles holding in there is not going to be released onto my paper, right? Because once all this touches the paper, whoosh, right, it releases. So we're going to take our gold. We're just going to maybe follow our other lines. We're going to dip again, dry off a little if we need to. Okay, and I do like to keep my dirty rag in my hand for occasions like this because I'm going to be going back and forth, right? Dropping and dragging and dabbing and all the things. So just drop your gold wherever it feels right. Don't overthink it. Just put it in there. You don't have to do a lot because we are going to also add the gold embossing or whatever color you want. You can do white, you can do pink, you can do red, you can do any. I'm doing gold mainly because my piece started off as kind of a gold piece. Okay, so when we feel like we have enough, we can see if a flat brush will splatter. I've never tried splattering with a flat brush. Not a lot of super splatter. Okay, so we clean off our brush, lay it flat, and then we grab our splatter brush, which is going to be just any kind of round. I like to use maybe a round 6. I'm gonna grab my Escoda round 6. I'm going to dip it back into the gold, fairly liquid, and I'm just going to lightly, that was a little too heavy, lightly splatter. And last time I didn't clean off my brush, and it didn't either. So see, I have a water droplet, and Those are typically undesirable for most people, depending on what you're doing. I don't super hate them. I also didn't really want them, but you know what? Since my initial one had them, we'll go ahead and leave them. And you know, I have quite a few, so maybe it looks a tad more intentional. So we'll just add a few more. And this part you can skip because, you know, unless you do the same thing I do. So when you're splattering, you want to dry. See how I have all these? You probably can't even see it. Let's stand up and show you. See, I have all these water splashes all over. You want to just roll your brush around or shake it off onto your towel because you don't want all that water. All that water is just going to splatter onto your work. Okay, so do it better than I did and don't do that. But you know what? If you did, it's not the end of the world. You can just do another one. All right, we are going to dry quickly. You can let it dry, make it dry, whichever you like. I like to use the heat tool. And so let's dry. My trick for testing when things are dry, I like to use the back of my hand and feel if it's cool. If it's cool to the touch, it's not quite dry. If it's warm and neutral, then it's so right over on the right hand side, it's still a little wet. So I'm gonna keep drying. We're all dried up. What we're gonna do now is remove the tape, because when you're embossing, the powder will just get stuck in the tape. You can leave the tape on if you're doing an application where you're adding more water and watercolor and paints, but for now we're not doing that. So we're gonna take the tape off, and I do reuse my tape. So I'm just setting it to the side, on the side of my table, and I use it for later. Okay, so we have this. At this point in time, you can take a look at all angles and decide which direction you want your card to go. If you prefer this way, you can go this way. My lines are a little dark, so you could have not gone as dark on this one. They're much more loose. Different look though, right? And that's okay. Different look, different feel. That's okay. You don't want everyone to look exactly the same, right? Who wants a cookie cutter card? I know I don't. I like the differences. So yeah, and you could have done different colors. You could have done lighter, anything. I'm going to leave this down for now. With this kind of powder and stamping and heat, you're going to want something to protect your table, because the heat tool does get pretty hot and it can ruin surfaces if you leave it on too long. But if you have something like this, a plexi or even a clipboard or something, like maybe a wooden clipboard, plastic clipboard, whatever it is that you use, this one's pretty thick, so you just do want a surface. You don't want to do it straight on top of your surface unless you have maybe a countertop that you're used to doing it on. Anyway, just forewarning you to protect your surface. Okay, so the first thing I do is I take a look at what I'm thinking, right? I turn my piece around, I decide where I want things to sit. Okay, so maybe we'll go this route. I will maybe put the little heart in the corner. I think I'll keep the text. I do have a water splatter in the middle. I'm not sure if I want to go right in the middle and then maybe find a smaller heart stamp. I could absolutely do that. So I have been using this one, so I don't want to set this on top and show you where I would place it and just leave it there, because the stamp has residue on it. You will leave that residue on your paper. So you don't want this to touch your workspace until you are ready, if that makes sense. Okay, if it's a brand new stamp, sure, have at it. If you've cleaned it off really well, you can probably put it down there just so you can see where things are going to lay out, but you kind of don't want to, again, because there could be residue on there and it stays. The residue does not go away. Since I have these water spots, it might be kind of just put it right in the middle there. Okay, so I did clean this stamp off, but again, that residue is still on there, so I wouldn't touch it. Okay, so we take our watermark stamp pad. Again, I'll link all this, and so you'll have every supply that I use down in the description. Take my ink pad. I'm gently dabbing. I don't know, I usually end up doing like probably 8 times. You can take a look at it. You do want to make sure there's nothing on the stamp, like there's a little something, because it'll you know, block whatever you're trying to get. So just make sure your stamp is clean. I'm not super anal about placement. I do try to get it in the middle, but if I don't, no big deal. Okay, so stamp down. Don't wiggle it too much, because I just found the more you mess with it, the more things can go wrong. Okay, I do cover this right away. I use my rubber band so it doesn't dry out, and we're done with that. stamp, we're done. Soap and water, can wash it with. Okay, now I get my little, my card. I like to use black because the embossing powder shows up really well. Have your sweepy brush ready nearby. Right, again, this is embossing gold powder. You can use any color you want, any embossing powder. At this point, you could have used a gel pen if you're not stamping. You could just use regular ink and stamp it. You can do whatever you have if you don't want to buy more stuff. Okay, so I sprinkled it on top of where the stamp is, okay, and then I take it, I turn it over, and I flick the card in all the different spots. I turn it back over. I see where there's extra residue because you want, so see this S didn't always all the way get the stamp all the way, and that's okay. Sometimes I'll put more powder on it, see if maybe the powder just missed. Nope. And so there's a way to fix that, and I can show you, but it doesn't really bother me. So I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to mess with it, but if it bothers you, what you can do is you can, ooh, that's okay. So you can make sure nothing got knocked off. You can, if it did, see there's a loop on the H, and I'm just gonna sprinkle a little bit more on there. I feel like maybe it got hit. It did. Okay, so see that H has a loop back. So you just wanna make sure, flick it again. Okay, this will also be in the links. So this is a very fine tip pen, and this is basically the same thing as this, but in a pen form. So this can be used to do touch-ups. And so if you have a spot like this S that didn't quite get colored in with the powder, you can just do it yourself. Okay, so now, I said I wasn't going to do it, but I did anyway, just to show you. So then we take our powder and we pour it on the part we touched up. That's why those pens are so darn handy, and I say they're kind of must-haves. Okay, so I did get the little S down there. Perfect? No, and that's okay. So right away after I do this, I set this aside. There is no like time, so you don't have to rush and get the heat on this right away. This stuff, as far as I've had experience, it can just sit for a while, scarily so. It doesn't wipe away, you can't start over. So if you mess up this with the stamp portion and that clear stamp that we added before this embossing, you kind of just got to go with it. That's why that pen's so important, because you can touch things up. Okay, so what I do, I shake this, I shake it down in that little valley. I put my jar on top of my plastics. You don't want this crap on your table. It's kind of messy. And I just tap the side of the card. I take it down the valley with my sweet brush, okay? And then I get it all in there. I tap the card again. Sometimes I flick it, and I sweep the rest in again. Okay, I set this off to the side. Immediately put the lid on this stuff. Trust me. I'm pretty sure you can figure out why I say that. Okay, and this is how much I've been embossing with this gold powder. This is like my #1. I use this 95% of the time, this gold. Love, love, love gold. Okay, here we go. So we're gonna dry this. This does get very hot. Again, just keep your fingers away. Do it on the plexi. I'm gonna hold it up close to you. If I were doing this not for you, I would just put it on the table and leave it. But I want you to see the stuff that happens. So I'm gonna turn the heat tool on, and we'll just watch from here. Let me pause for a second. So what I'm doing is I'm holding it about 2 inches away, and you'll see me moving around like this. I don't leave it in one spot too long. I don't want to cook the paper. I've heard people burning it. I have not burned my paper, so I can't tell you. I just do keep it moving around though. And I do keep it about 2 inches apart, and this heat tool I highly recommend has low and high, and I do use it on high. Okay, we'll go back to this. Okay, so what I do want to explain what I was doing. Once I see it start to turn golden like that, you know how it's kind of dull? There's a dull spot right here. I can take the heat tool and go back to that spot and just cook it, so to speak, a little bit more, and it'll turn gold as well. So you want to make sure all the spots get turned that bright golden, and then you know you can move on. And Yeah, I think that's the only spot. The S again, I could go back and touch up the S if I want. I'm probably not going to. Let me get that one last spot and see if we can get it golden. You'll just want to move your heat tool around. Keep going with it. And sometimes, like you saw me angling the board and the heat tool, you'll want to angle it. Sometimes it'll just go faster when you hit just the right spot. It's just kind of hit and miss that way. And just, you'll find out what works best for you. That is it. That is all for my embossing. I love using this stuff on holiday cards. I love using it on special occasion cards. I love it as embellishment. It's an awesome, fun thing to just create kind of a random abstract background, and then use any stamps you have. You can use your playful stamps, your cutesy ones. You can use your, ones with words. There's just endless possibilities. You could stick florals on this and just say thinking of you, right? It's just a zillion, billion possibilities. And most people, quite honestly, already have some stamps. And so you really just need, the stamp pad, the embossing powder, and the heat tool. And the rest of the stuff you kind of have around the house, right? You have the paper, the brush, you have the watercolors already. You do want, I swear by this little pen though, for if I wanted to touch up that S, I can absolutely touch it up. And so I'm just looking at it. Come on, focus. There we go. So see how that's a little dull right there? It almost makes me feel like that didn't get heated up enough, or perhaps you just didn't get enough on there. And I like the kind of rustic look. I'll show you the rest of the ones I did over the week. When I use the masking fluid, I think it leaves residue. And so a lot of the gold was kind of sticking to where the masking fluid residue. So you want to be more careful than I was. I don't think I was careful enough. And so kind of had a snafu with that. So you do want to be aware of that. Could cause issues. You don't even have to use masking fluid, and you could skip the whole part, but just so you're aware. But I really did love the background and the layering. I did a bunch of layering. So if you're curious about that, check out my Instagram feed. And it is there in how I did that. So here is the one, and see if you do it against a darker background, obviously it pops. So if I had wanted to perhaps use maybe a darker color, I could have used a darker embossing powder here, right? So it pops more. I like the subtle leaf, but it's completely up to you what you choose to do. Different stamps, different looks, different feels. The embossing pen is what I used on here. This one right here, the touch-up pen is what I call it. And so I just, loosely, messily did 2 hearts, and then I used a stamp here. And that's about it. So I would love to see yours, and I hope you give this a try. I think it's super fun, and it adds just, I don't know, playfulness and whimsy to something to celebrate and to send somebody. All right, hope you guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. See you next time. Bye.